Most people are not stopped by others, they're stopped by themselves. The biggest barrier isn't outside, it's inside. The first step to stop holding yourself back is to recognize that most of the limitations you face are not real obstacles but self-made barriers. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "I'm not ready, I don't have enough money," or "what if I fail?" These thoughts feel like facts, but in reality, they are mental chains. You build them every time you doubt yourself, every time you hesitate, and every time you let fear decide instead of courage. It's important to realize that these invisible walls don't actually exist in the outside world. They live in your mind, and the more you believe them, the stronger they become. For example, someone might want to start a business, but before even trying, they convince themselves they don't have enough experience or the perfect plan. So instead of starting, they stay stuck. The truth is, the experience would only come by starting, the plan would only improve through action, but fear disguised as logic convinces them to wait, and that waiting becomes wasted time. You must also understand that holding yourself back often feels safe. When you don't try, you can't fail. When you don't step forward, you can't be judged. But that so-called safety is the very thing that traps you in the same place year after year. It's like locking yourself inside a cage and then complaining about being stuck. The cage isn't built by others. It's built by your own thoughts, beliefs, and fears. The good news is, once you recognize this pattern, you gain power over it. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. You cannot break chains you don't see. The moment you realize the excuses are self-created, you also realize they can be destroyed. And the more you challenge those excuses, the weaker they become, until eventually they can no longer control your decisions or your future. Fear is one of the most powerful forces that holds people back, but the truth is, fear only grows in the space between thought and action. The longer you sit and think about what could go wrong, the bigger fear becomes. You start imagining every possible failure, every potential judgment, and every outcome that could embarrass you. Before long, fear has convinced you that it's safer to do nothing. But here's the secret: fear shrinks the very moment you act. Think about a time when you were nervous before doing something. Maybe speaking in front of people, approaching someone new, or trying something outside your comfort zone. Before you acted, the fear felt overwhelming, but the second you stepped into it, the fear started to lose its grip. Why? Because fear is an illusion that thrives on hesitation. Once you move, reality replaces the fear. Your brain learns that it wasn't as dangerous as it made it out to be. This is why action comes before confidence, not the other way around. Too many people wait until they feel confident before they start. They tell themselves, "Once I feel ready, then I'll take the step." But confidence doesn't show up first, it's built by doing. You gain confidence when you face fear and prove to yourself that you can handle it. Every time you act despite being scared, you build a new layer of belief in yourself. Shifting from fear to action is about deciding to move anyway. Fear says, "What if I fail?" Action says, "What if I learn?" Fear says, "What if they laugh at me?" Action says, "What if this changes my life?" When you choose action over hesitation, you take your power back. You stop being controlled by fear and start training yourself to respond with courage. And here's the most important part: you don't need to take massive action right away. Start small, make the call, write the first page, take the first step. Action is like a spark. It doesn't look like much at first, but it has the power to ignite momentum. And once momentum is on your side, fear doesn't stand a chance. Perfection is one of the biggest lies that keeps people stuck. So many dreams never see the light of day because the person behind them is waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, or the perfect version of themselves. They think, "I'll start when I have more money," or "I'll take action when I feel completely ready," or "I'll try once I have everything figured out." But here's the truth: perfection never arrives. There is no perfect moment, no flawless plan, and no magical version of you that suddenly has all the answers. Waiting for perfect is the fastest way to guarantee that you'll stay exactly where you are. Think about it. Every great achievement, every breakthrough, every invention came from someone who started before they were ready. They didn't wait until conditions were ideal. They started with what they had, learned along the way, and improved over time. Progress creates clarity, not the other way around. You can only adjust your path once you're moving forward, but if you're standing still waiting for perfection, nothing changes. Perfection is also dangerous because it hides itself as responsibility. You convince yourself that you're not procrastinating, you're just planning or preparing. But endless planning without execution is just fear in disguise. At some point, you have to realize that perfection is a moving target. You'll never reach it. And if you keep waiting until you feel perfectly ready, you'll be waiting for the rest of your life. The real shift happens when you stop asking, "Is this perfect?" and instead ask, "Is this enough to begin?" Because beginning is the only thing that matters. The first step doesn't need to be flawless. It just needs to be taken. Once you start, you'll gain the experience, skills, and knowledge you thought you needed beforehand. And over time, you'll realize that starting messy was far more valuable than waiting endlessly for perfect. The way you speak to yourself shapes the way you live your life. Every belief you carry is like a lens through which you see the world. If that lens is covered in doubt, fear, and negativity, then everything you look at will appear out of reach. Limiting beliefs are like invisible scripts running in the background of your mind, whispering things like, "I'm not smart enough," "I'll never succeed," or "I don't deserve it." Over time, those whispers become your reality because your actions always follow your beliefs. Here's the truth: your mind is always listening. The words you repeat to yourself eventually become your identity. If you keep telling yourself, "I can't," your brain will look for reasons to prove it true. If you say, "I'll probably fail," you'll find excuses not to try. This is why so many people stay stuck. They're fighting against themselves. The battle isn't out in the world, it's in their own self-talk. But here's the good news: beliefs are not permanent. They can be replaced, rewired, and rebuilt. You can choose to speak new words into your life, words that empower instead of weaken you. Instead of saying, "I can't do this," say, "I'm learning to do this." Instead of "I'm not good enough," say, "I'm growing stronger every day." Instead of "I don't deserve success," say, "I'm creating a life I deserve." These are not empty affirmations. They are power statements that redirect your focus toward possibility instead of limitation. Each time you replace a limiting belief with a power statement, you are training your mind to see yourself differently. Over time, this rewires your self-image, and when your self-image changes, your actions naturally follow. A person who believes "I'm capable" will take steps that someone who thinks "I'm weak" would never attempt. You don't need to completely silence every negative thought. That's not realistic, but you can drown them out by consistently choosing stronger words. Speak the language of growth, resilience, and possibility until it becomes the new normal in your mind. Because when you change the way you talk to yourself, you change the way you show up in the world. One of the most powerful ways to stop holding yourself back is to start living as the person you want to become right now. Most people make the mistake of thinking they'll change after they achieve success. They tell themselves, "Once I have the money, then I'll act confident," or "Once I get the opportunity, then I'll work harder." But the truth is the opposite. You don't achieve success and then become that person. You become that person first, and that's what leads you to success. Start by clearly defining the future version of yourself. Imagine the person who has already reached the goals you dream about. How do they think? How do they speak? How do they make decisions? How do they spend their mornings? Most importantly, how do they carry themselves when faced with fear, challenges, or uncertainty? That version of you already exists, not in the future, but as a possibility you can step into today. Once you have that vision, begin acting as if you are already that person. If your future self is disciplined, start showing discipline today, even in small ways. If your future self is confident, practice walking, speaking, and making decisions with confidence now. If your future self is successful, stop waiting for success. To arrive before you behave that way, behave successfully first, and watch how the world begins to respond differently to you. This is not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about aligning your current actions with the identity you want to grow into. Because identity drives behavior. The moment you shift your identity, your habits, choices, and mindset all start to shift too. And when your daily actions begin to reflect the person you want to be, the gap between where you are and where you want to go starts to close. The future version of you isn't waiting somewhere far away. It's built in every decision you make today. Every small step, every bold choice, every moment you choose growth over fear is a piece of that future self coming to life. And the sooner you step into that identity, the sooner you'll stop holding yourself back from the life you're meant to live. At the end of the day, the biggest obstacle standing in your way is not the world outside. It's the limits you've accepted inside. The fears, the doubts, the excuses, the waiting for the perfect moment. All of it keeps you locked in place while life keeps moving forward. But the truth is, you are stronger than the stories holding you back. The moment you decide to act in spite of fear, to choose progress over perfection, to replace your doubts with power, and to step into the identity of your future self, everything changes. You stop being the person who hesitates, and you become the person who builds, creates, and moves forward with intention. You don't need to wait for tomorrow. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. Your life begins the second you stop holding yourself back. And that second can be right now.